And today is August 17th, 2019, and we'll start with the homage to the Buddha 3 times. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so actually I sent out, when the announcement that I sent out, I said we start with Sutta number 113, but now when I looked at it, then I realized that we had done that last week, so we're actually starting with number 114. And so again, this is the Anguttara Nikaya, the book of the numerical discourses, and we are in the chapter of the threes. And so now we're getting pretty close to the end of this chapter, and a lot at the end are repetition cycles, so we can move through the remainder pretty quickly. Okay, so this is a short sutta called, named 114, and the theme is the manifestation of 3 persons who are rare in the world, who appear rarely in the world. So the first of these is the Tathagata, the Arhat, the perfectly enlightened one, is rare in the world. And so to understand the rarity of a Tathagata, Sammasambuddha, lots of people go around claiming to be enlightened, I'm enlightened, I'm enlightened, I'm enlightened. But to understand against the classical Buddhist background the rarity of of a fully enlightened Buddha, one needs some conception of the Buddhist cosmology, the picture of the cosmos and cosmic time in early Buddhism. So cosmic time is measured in, the unit of cosmic time is a kappa, or maybe people might know the Sanskrit kalpa. And sometimes it's called a mahakappa, a great aeon. And how long is an aeon? There are suttas where somebody, sometimes a monk, sometimes a Brahmin, comes to the Buddha and says, how long is an aeon? They want to know the number of years. And then the Buddha says it's very, very difficult to state the length, the duration of a kalpa. Then the monk asks, can you give a simile? Then the Buddha says, I'll give you a simile. And so the Buddha says, imagine that there's a mountain of solid granite. It's 1 yojana. 1 yojana is about 6 miles. 6 miles high, 6 miles wide, solid granite. Then once every 100 years, a man will come by with a piece of Benares cloth. It's very fine, delicate cloth, and just brush it one time. Okay, so the Buddha says, and when the person is doing that, more quickly will he wear away that mountain of solid granite before a kalpa comes to an end. So it seems to me that somebody doing that, they'll never wear away that mountain. But anyway, it's just a simile, just to show that the kalpa is an extremely long period of time. And maybe if we to bring in modern cosmology, contemporary, astronomical cosmology, we would say that the kalpa is the period of time that it takes. They speak about the Big Bang, and then the expanding universe out of the Big Bang. And then, I don't know if this idea is still in favor, but there's supposed to be, at least some years ago, after the universe reaches a maximum amount of expansion, then the dark matter kicks in and starts bringing about the attraction between the expanding particles of matter. And so there starts taking place a contraction which ends in the great crunch. Okay, so if the great expansion is, I think they estimate something like 16 billion years, and then the great contraction is another 16 billion years, so there's 32 billion years. So that's the duration of a kalpa. Okay, so it said within a kalpa, there can be from 1 to 5 perfectly enlightened Buddhas arising. The maximum is 5. In our kalpa, the one that we are living in now, is going to have 5 Buddhas. So it's called sometimes a Buddha kalpa. The word Buddha or Bhadra, or Sanskritized form, means excellent or glorious. Why? Okay, so this is an excellent or glorious kalpa because we have 5 Buddhas in this aeon. So we have our present Buddha, Gautama or Shakyamuni Buddha, then going back, previously there was Kassapa Buddha, and then let me just do a little mental count. Vipassi, Siti, Vesabu, those 3, no? Kakusanda, Konagamana, yeah. So we have the previous Buddhas of this aeon. Kakusanda, Konagamana, Kassapa. So those are the past Buddhas, the prehistorical past Buddhas. Then we have our present Buddha, Gautama or Shakyamuni. And then there's one more Buddha to come, who is now supposedly in the two-seater heaven, waiting his time. Yeah, in Sanskrit, Maitreya, or in Pali, Maitreya. So Maitreya or Maitreya has almost completed all of his bodhisattva career, and he is just sort of, they call him one birth away. But this is the thing about the appearance of Buddhas in the world. Especially you Chinese Buddhists have to be very careful, because I hear sometimes in Taiwan or China somebody appears and claims, I'm a Sammasambuddha. But it said that a Sammasambuddha does not appear, just can't arise in the world as long as the existence of a Sammasambuddha is still present in the world. So the special task of the Sammasambuddha is to discover the Dhamma, to penetrate it and discover it during a period when it does not exist in the world, or when it's not known in the world. In a sense, you could say the Dhamma as the eternal principles of things, the true nature of things, is ever existent. But the task of a Buddha is to discover that true nature and to discover the path to liberation from the cycle of birth and death, and then to make it known in the world in its completeness and its totality, so that countless other beings can follow that path and attain liberation. And so that's why the Buddha is called Buddha Ratana, the jewel of the Buddha, because he is so rare and precious. They say that the Ratana, a jewel, is of great value because it's extremely rare. And so a Buddha is of great value because he's so rare in the world and because he accomplishes that which others can't accomplish, which is to discover not simply in a sufficient amount for his own liberation. That can be done by disciple arahats. But the Sammasambuddha discovers the totality. He has the access to the totality of the Dhammadhatu, the realm of principles of the Dhamma. And so according to, this is from a slightly later period, but what the Buddha accomplishes is Sabanyuta Jnana. So this is the omniscient knowledge, which doesn't mean that the Buddha knows every fact and every entity in the world. Like that, it doesn't mean that in the 5th century, in India in the 5th century BC, the Buddha knew how many, what do you call these, rafters? These support beams. How many beams will be in Kuan Yin Hall and Zhuang Yin Monastery in Carmel, New York in the late 20th century, early 21st century. But it said that when the Buddha turns his mind to something that he wants to know, that will come into the range of his knowledge. But I think what's sufficient for the Sabanyuta Jnana is that the Buddha knows all of the constituents of the conditioned world, the 5 aggregates, 12 sense bases, 18 elements. He knows all of the different planes of existence and the different beings in those planes, and he knows the different aspects of the path leading to liberation, and he knows how to teach in the way that is exactly appropriate for the people that he's guiding and instructing. So when we take refuge in the Buddha, we're taking refuge truly in a unique person. So I say unique in that the quality of Buddhahood is unique, but that there are multiple Buddhas throughout time. And then I spoke about the Bhadrakalpa, so that is the glorious or excellent aeon. But there are aeons in which there might be 1 Buddha, 2 Buddhas, 3 Buddhas, 4 Buddhas, and then there is something called Sunyakappa. This means an empty aeon. And that is a period, a cosmic period, again, billions and billions of years in which no Buddha arises at all. So it's not the fixed law that a kalpa will give rise to a Buddha. And probably the general, I think that there's supposed to be many sunya kalpas, many empty aeons. And when there's a more fruitful aeon, generally there'll be 1, 2, or 3 Buddhas. But we are in an especially auspicious period because we have 5. But don't sit around thinking, I've been born in an auspicious aeon. We have Maitreya coming in the future, so I'll just take it easy. Easy now, and then when Maitreya appears, then I will go to him and say, Bhante, When will the next Buddha appear? Okay, so Ken, did you have a question?
Yes.
If we have our wireless mic.
One thing I was wondering, the Buddha can definitely see the past lives of
the people who come to him.
Could he also see the future? Was that clearly see the future?
Yes, an interesting question, because if he could see the future in all details, it would mean that the future was determined.
Right.
But I'm trying to go just on the basis of the suttas themselves, not taking in the later literature, I think, says that, because they want to expand the range of the omniscient knowledge. So the Buddha sees all dhammas, past, present, and future. But what's said in the suttas is that the Buddha said, I see a person conducting himself, behaving in such and such a way that if that person were to die now, they would be reborn in this plane or that plane. So what the Buddha can see is, based on a person's present conduct, if they were to die, where they will be reborn. And then there are suttas which do give descriptions of what's to happen in the future, but that could be based on what you might call general determining principles or general conditioning principles. But whether the Buddha can see the future in precise detail, it seems to me it would be contradictory to the indeterminacy of the future. For him to be able to see everything that's going to happen in precise detail, that means that we don't have any real choices in the present, that everything is predetermined.
I was also thinking one day in the lines of, I don't know whether this is in scripture or whether this was added later, where King, I believe, Kosol had this series of dreams that he went to the Buddha and asked him to explain.
King Prasenadi's dreams, yeah.
Yes, yeah, they were and Buddha had said, in the future, way later from your time, this will happen, etc.
Yeah.
But I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, that is in the commentary. Yeah, I don't remember the dreams. Yeah, I'll have to look that up. I remember that there was this story about King Kosala had these 5 dreams, and then he reported to the Buddha. And then there are suttas. It's called the Dangers of the Future suttas. It's in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fives, where the Buddha speaks about in the future there will be these dangers. Eventually we'll get to that group of suttas, where he's speaking about how in the future there'll be a time when the Dhamma has deteriorated, and then especially it's always to blame the monks. The monks will be living in luxury and fighting with each other. Yeah, okay, I think Will had his question.
Bhante, even in the Sutta, can there be Pacheka Buddhas?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah, this is a very important question, actually. So you might ask, if there's no Buddha in the world, is there any possibility for gaining liberation, for gaining enlightenment and liberation? And there is a class of beings different from the Sammasambuddha. They're called in Pali Pacheka Buddha, in Sanskrit Pratyeka Buddha. Okay, the Pacheka Buddha or Pratyeka Buddha is somebody who penetrates to the liberating truth without depending on the teaching of a Sammasambuddha. They realize the truth, the liberating truth on their own. They gain liberation on their own, but they are not able to establish a sasana, that is, an institutional presence of the teaching of the Dhamma in the world. And they don't try to communicate the truth of their enlightenment to others. Sometimes the Pacceka Buddha is depicted, sometimes it's translated as a non-teaching Buddha or a silent Buddha. That's not correct. According to the commentaries which describe in greater detail the Pacceka Buddhas, they actually live in communities, or at least some live in communities. They take disciples and they teach disciples, their monastic disciples, they'll teach the practices of samadhi and guide them in the practice of samadhi. But for some reason they don't teach insight and try to guide to liberation. I don't know why. And they'll also teach, they have lay disciples, they're lay supporters, and they'll teach their lay supporters the silas, the precepts, the practice of dana, giving, and if they meet with appropriate lay disciples, they might teach them meditation practices. But they don't try to establish the sasana, the institutional Dhamma in the world, or to guide others to enlightenment. I think probably it's said that, the difference, this is again according to the commentaries, between the Pacceka Buddha and the Sammasambuddha Buddha, the difference in their ability depends on the amount of time that they have to accumulate the paramis or paramitas through their traveling through samsara. So it's said that to become a Sammasambuddha, it takes from 4, 8 to 16 asankhayas plus, don't run out the door, 100,000 great aeons. The asankhaya, we translate this as incalculable, an incalculable period. It's much, much longer than the great aeon. I've seen some mathematical representations of it, but I don't remember what it is. And then on top of that, you have to add in 100,000 of these great kalpas. So that is the length of time. One who has wisdom as the dominant faculty completes the practice in 4 asankhayas. One who has, energy as the dominant faculty takes 8 asankhayas. One who has faith as the dominant faculty takes 16 asankhayas. And then for all of them, they have to add in 100,000 great aeons. So everybody thinks, I want to become a Buddha, I want to become a Buddha. It isn't so easy. Okay, then to become a Pacceka Buddha, it's said that it takes only 2 asankhayas. And 100,000 great aeons. And then, as you go down the scale to become the chief disciple, I think it's 1 asankhaya. I think it's 1 asankhaya and 100,000 great aeons. the chief disciple. Those are like Sariputta and Moggallana. So sometimes it's said in the Mahayana literature, the Savakas are in a hurry to get out of samsara, so they just quickly cultivate the practice for their own liberation. But actually, to become a chief disciple, one does it out of compassion for the world, because the Buddha has to have chief disciples. But one just doesn't go through 4, 8, or 16, but one takes a shorter course. And then to become great disciples takes still shorter period of time. And during these periods of time, one is developing the 6 or the 10 paramitas. Okay, so anyway, we've gotten off track of the sutta. Okay, so we're speaking about how things that are rare or persons that are rare in the world. So this is the fully enlightened Buddha. Then a person who teaches the Dhamma and discipline, the Dhamma Vinaya, proclaimed by the Tathagata, is rare in the world. So probably even during the period when the Dhamma is existing in the world, and so there are many people who get qualified as Dhamma teachers or MBSR, is that what it is? Mindfulness-based stress reduction teachers. But so many people get qualified as Dhamma teachers, but one has to be able to teach the Dhamma, I would say, accurately, correctly, and in detail. That kind of person is very rare in the world. Maybe even in a country like Sri Lanka, where there are Dhamma discourses every weekend, every day, but probably those who are really teaching very, very well and in detail and very correctly, not so many. Okay, then I think the point of the sutta is to sort of emphasize the third point. Because just as the Buddha is rare in the world, a qualified Dhamma teacher is rare in the world, but also we think that people who are truly grateful and thankful should be common. Everybody's always saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. But the person who's truly grateful, truly thankful, is rare in the world. So maybe this is a kind of implicitly, through a statement of fact, it's conveying an instruction to develop gratitude and thankfulness. I just want to see if it mentions anything about... No, it just gives the word explanation. Okay, so any questions about this sutta? Okay, nothing from Kim. Do you have the...
Bhante, I was wondering whether this means just regular thankfulness or thankfulness to receive the Dharma.
It seems in this context that one could say that it refers specifically to thankfulness to receive the Dhamma, but that's not specified. And then there is I think it's the commentary to the Sutta-nipata, which speaks about the people for whom one should be thankful. So it mentions, especially if I remember correctly, like parents, one's elders in the family, one's teachers, not only Dhamma teachers, but even secular teachers, or anybody who's in any way benefited one in one's life. Maybe one's doctors, assuming one has like a personal doctor who's very friendly to one, Dhamma friends with whom you share the Dhamma, brothers and sisters who might be helpful, any other kind of friends in worldly life.
Yeah, I'm just having difficulty, to have Buddha and a thankful person in the same list. It's just...
Yeah, I think this is maybe the way the Buddha is sort of emphasizing the importance of gratitude by putting the thankful person as being, of course, not quite as rare as a Buddha, but to show that a truly thankful person is very rare. And sort of this is an implicit instruction to cultivate gratitude as a practice. Usually we just take the help we receive from others for granted. But if one does a little period of reflection, how our very lives are dependent on others. And so even when we do, this is actually done in the East Asian Buddhist traditions. It's something that should have been included in the Theravada tradition, but we don't have it. At the mealtime, one of the reflections, the 5 reflections that's done, is to reflect that even the food that I have in front of me depends upon the labor of many people. So you have to think of the farmers who grow the food, nowadays the truckers who transport the food, the people who unload the food from the truck, then the shop owners that sell the food, and then for us monastics, we think about the cooks that prepare the food, or the dayakas, the donors who donate the food to the monastery, the cooks who prepare the food and offer it. And so we think that even, the food that we eat depends on the labors of many people. And the clothes that we wear depends on people who grow, assuming it's a cotton robe, who grow the cotton. And even we could extend it beyond the human world, like so many of the fruits and the nuts that we eat depend on the labor of the bees, which are being decimated by the use of these chemical insecticides. Okay, we have the bees, we depend on the bees. The fertile soil depends on the earthworms. They eat things and then they excrete, and it's the excretion of the earthworms that makes the soil fertile, one of the contributing factors. So one could develop gratitude towards this whole web of life, that to each one engaging in their own activity make human life possible. And yet, of all of these species, we're somehow able to function together, to integrate together. There's just one species which is disrupting the entire delicate web of life through its greed, recklessness, presumption. What is that one species? Human beings, yeah. Okay, was there any other question on this? It's a short sutta, but very rich in meaning. Okay, so let us move on. Oops. Yeah, also I think, just coming back, this sutta is very, very, maybe very pertinent to the life of monastics. Maybe the Buddha intended it in that way. Because our lives, we say that we depend upon the generosity of others for our very lives. In fact, this is one of the reflections that the Buddha has taught for the samana, for the renunciants. Parapatibaddha me jivikati. My very life is dependent on others. So not only food and robes, but like everything, like we're offered a place to live. If we get sick, we're offered medical care. All of these things that I'm using here, from the recorder, computer, come from the kindness of others. Every week I come, there's a flask of tea through the kindness of others. Okay, now we'll come to sutta number 115. Another sutta on 3 kinds of people found in the world. So one who is easily measured, one who is hard to measure, and one who is immeasurable. We'll see if we can figure out what is meant by being easy to measure, hard to measure, and so on. So who is the one who is easily measured? Okay, so this is the standard description of, or one of the standard descriptions of a bad monk who's not really terribly bad, but just who is, let's say, heedless, the heedless monk. So someone is restless, puffed up, personally vain, talkative, rambling in his talk, muddle-minded, without sampajanya, without clear comprehension. Muddle-minded is actually, the Pali, it's without mindfulness. So you could see the Pali expression here is mutta sati. So sati is the word for mindfulness, and mutta is something like confused, muddled. So the mindfulness has become muddled. Somebody who doesn't maintain mindfulness. Then without clear comprehension is asampajano. So without sampajanya, without clear comprehension, unconcentrated is asamahito, that is without samadhi. And so then with a wandering mind, with loose, literally it's with natural sense faculties, that they just, whenever something interesting passes in front, they look up, always looking around, not controlled and restrained in the senses. So what could be meant by saying that this person is easily measured?
It's obvious when you see them.
Well, it might be obvious also. Let's say the person who's hard to measure. So this is just described there. Described it. It's described, this person is described in just exactly the opposite way. So one who's not restless, not puffed up, not vain, not excessively talkative, and so on. What's going on? Okay, one with mindfulness established, upatita sati. upatita sati, one who is okay, thank you so much. I was just hoping for that. So I'm very thankful to Matt, with thanks and gratitude for the tissue. So one with mindfulness established, with sampajanya, clear comprehension, with samadhi, concentrated mind, ekagacito, one-pointed in mind, and then I think it's Sangvutindriya. Yes, Sangvutindriya, with restrained faculties. Okay, I think a person like this, you said you could tell the person just by looking at them. That would seem to apply also to the one who's hard to measure. So what? And I have to say, I don't have in my mind the idea there's a right answer, and I'm sort of testing you. I'm just trying to figure it out myself. Okay, Alison, did you want to?
Yeah, I just want to know.
And take the microphone. Maybe it was.
I'm just curious, before we answer the question you asked, could you give us this Pali word for measurable?
Okay.
Immeasurable?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so being measurable would be pameya. And actually this would be a bit interesting, looking at this linguistically. So it's actually pa is a prefix, and meya is, grammatically this is called a future passive participle or a gerundive. So it's the form of can be or should be. But the verb, I think, is puminati, which probably doesn't occur, or doesn't occur very often. But the more common word is a noun, pamana, which means measurement. And then based on this, actually what's more familiar is the negation, appa. Manya, I think it's a feminine noun, appamanya, which means an immeasurable state. And so we have 4 immeasurable states. It's chatasso, appamanya. These are the same as the 4 Brahma-viharas. So, one develops loving kindness, appamana, without any measurement. And similarly for karuna, compassion, mudita, altruistic joy, upekkha, equanimity. So all of those should be developed appamana, without measure. And it's related to, I think there's an English word, yeah. Yeah, of course. The word meter, you could see some connection. Meter and the root in Pali from which these words are derived is ma. And so meter is something a unit of length used to measure things. Okay, so that is the etymological explanation. But of course, when we say that a person is easy to measure, difficult to measure, it doesn't mean that one takes a ruler and says this one is 5'8", that one, we can't measure. So, what sense can we give to these expressions? Yeah, Manu.
What I was thinking, maybe the second person, the emotions that may not come out, or the words that may not come out, will not easily allow another person to maybe conclude what the person is thinking. Whereas in the first situation, if the person is very emotional, very talkative,
That's a good
then you know what the intentions are, you know what the thoughts are.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go on to the third person in this group. Okay, so here we have the third person. So who is the person that's immeasurable? And so the answer is that this is a monk who is an arahat, one whose asavas have been destroyed. So that person is immeasurable. Probably here one would say, for an ordinary person, like we have no ability to understand a person whose the roots of their existence that sort of bind them to repeated existence have been eliminated. So now that person is sort of almost, you would say, it's a living embodiment of the Nibbana Dhatu, which is the true immeasurable is the Nibbana Dhatu, the element of Nibbana. Yeah, it seems to me, this is my own speculation here, that really it should say that the person who is hard to measure, I don't think this person, in my opinion, is all that, if we take hard to measure, or to measure a person means to understand the person, I'd say even this person who has mindfulness established, who's concentrated with restrained faculties, not that hard to understand. So we could just see the person who's easily measured, easy to understand, the person who has mindfulness, clear comprehension, concentration, maybe for us more difficult to understand because we might not have experience, at least, of consistent mindfulness and deep samadhi. But still, we could have some idea of that person. My opinion, that the person that should have been put in here as the one who's hard to measure would be, it should say, here a person sees as it really is, or understands as it really is, this is dukkha, its origin, its cessation, or the path. That would make the person who's hard to understand a seika, that is, one who has reached at least the level of stream entry, but not yet an arhat. Then we have the stream enterer, once returner, non-returner. Because then, this is a person who's penetrated the liberating truth, but not yet fully embodied it. So, I have hard time knowing what it is to penetrate that truth, and so I don't really know what that person's, his realization or understanding might be like. So it's hard for me to understand. But still, that person is not yet fully liberated, so often they could be quite similar to an ordinary person. Now I see why I was sneezing and now I'm coughing. Yeah, there's a lot of smoke is coming up, and I think that they were not supposed to light incense in the in this hall.
I think today they use a different kind.
Excuse me?
Today, I believe they use a different kind of incense today. It smells different.
Yeah. A very dense incense. A very dense smoke coming up from the incense. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I understand. Okay, so anyway, I think we could say that we've dealt with this sutta enough. Unless any questions come up? Jenny had a question.
Does it depend on the meaning? Does it depend on who is measuring?
I think, of course, I'd say that the Buddha is speaking about this in relation to an ordinary person.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because I assume the Tathagata know all about his disciple.
Oh yeah, for the Buddha, of course, no problem. I think he's talking in general terms.
Finally, could it be about measure of virtue?
Actually, it would be not only virtue, but it would be the other qualities as well. And just that reminds me of a sutta that we had. I think we were doing this in our Pali class on Monday, where Sariputta comes to the Buddha and says, so far as I can see, that there has never been, will never be, and at present there is no ascetic or Brahmin who is superior to you, to the Buddha, in regard to higher knowledge. And then the Buddha says to Sariputta, he says, Sariputta, have you fathomed with your own mind all of the Buddhas of the past, the future, knowing such is their sila, their virtuous conduct, such is their samadhi, their concentration, such is their wisdom, such is their liberation, such are their modes of dwelling. And Sariputta says, no, I haven't. Okay, let us move on to the next sutta. Oh, this is actually an important one, and it's a bit long and difficult one. Okay, so here the Buddha speaks about 3 kinds of persons found existing in the world. And actually the 3, just the pattern of the 3 types is the same. All that differs is the attainment. So these are 3 persons that they are distinguished according to the stage of the formless, the arupa meditation that they attain. So we start with the first one. And this begins with the standard formula for the attainment of the base of boundless space, or the base of the infinity of space. The first arupa attainment, formless meditation. Okay, with the complete surmounting of perceptions of forms, with the passing away of perceptions of sensory impingement, with non-attention to perceptions of diversity, perceiving space is infinite, some person enters and dwells in the base of, of the infinity of space. So this is the attainment, and all that precedes it is just showing the conditions for entering the base of the infinity of space. Okay, now comes the important point. Okay, so this person who attains this very peaceful, very tranquil, meditative attainment. So this is going beyond the 4 jhanas, beyond the 4th jhana. And so what happens, this is according to the Visuddhi Magga system of explanation, to attain the base of the infinity of space, first one has to master the 4 jhanas on the basis of a kasina object. So even if one attains the 4 jhanas through mindfulness of breathing, one still will then take up a kasina that is one of these discs. Let us take, for example, the blue kasina, the circular blue disc, which one then inwardly visualizes, and then that becomes the object of absorption. Okay, now to enter or to attain the base of the infinity of space, mentally one would expand the kasina object, that blue disc, till it covers the entire inwardly visualized field. Then one makes the determination to remove the blue field of perception, or the blue expanse covering the field of inner perception. And so one just focuses on the space occupied by the blue kasina, not attending to the blue kasina itself. And so when the power of samadhi is strong enough, then it's said that the blue kasina gets rolled up, so to speak. It's like you have a carpet spread out there, or a sheet of blue paper, so to speak, and as though you're mentally rolling it up and moving it away. And then what remains is the space that was occupied by the blue expanse. That blue expanse had been expanded till it occupied the entire field, the entire mental field. So now one is left with just that infinite space in the mental field. And so the absorption in that boundless space is the meditative attainment of the base of the infinity of space. Okay, now one has a person who relishes it, desires it, enjoys it, and finds satisfaction in it. Okay, so this person is firm in it, firmly established in it, sort of intent upon it, and often dwells in this attainment. It's not a matter of just attaining it once or on rare occasions and then letting it go. But this is a person who repeatedly enters into absorption in that attainment. And then when he dies, he has not lost it. This doesn't mean that the person has to be actually in that meditative attainment at the time of death. It could be that the person, say he practices this meditation, let's say, up to the time of death. He does it as a regular practice, but then when he enters that final illness, he's not able, maybe he's weak, so not able to practice it. But he still hasn't abandoned the devotion to that practice. And so we could say at that time, he still hasn't lost it at the time of death, even though in the final illness he hasn't been practicing it. But what happens then when death takes place, because this, the force of that samadhi based on the infinity of space is very powerful samadhi. And so what happens in the death process is that samadhi will come up and govern or dominate the final process, the death process. And that force of that samadhi, the samadhi of the infinity of space, will then propel the consciousness when the mind leaves the body at death. That some force or the power of the samadhi propels the consciousness to rebirth in the base of the infinity of space. It's said that he is reborn in companionship with the devas of the base of the infinity of space. And when we see that sentence, then we imagine that, okay, he's reborn as a deva with a body, maybe a very subtle celestial body, and he's joining a whole group of other devas with their very subtle celestial bodies. And so maybe they're gathering together in the dining hall and sharing a cup of tea, sharing a meal together, or at least meeting in an assembly hall and chatting, each in their subtle bodies. But what's wrong with that picture?
Form.
What?
There's form and it's not infinite space.
Yeah, but the key
Beside. It's beside. That is
No. Okay, they're meeting together in their dining hall, enjoying a meal or a cup of tea together, or even put that aside, they're meeting in an assembly hall and chatting together.
There cannot be a form. There cannot be a form.
Right, there's no material form there. Yeah. So, what's meant by companionship with the devas in the base of the infinity of space? Interesting expression. It seemed, and here I'm just on completely speculative ground, that there can be some kind of maybe mental communion among these devas without dependence on the body as a physical medium of communication, maybe kind of mind-to-mind communication. Or maybe it means simply that he's reborn in the base of the infinity of space, and there are other beings dwelling there, but maybe there's no communication at all. I don't know. Anyway, the important point is we say he's reborn in the base of the infinity of space. Okay, so this is the realm of existence that corresponds to the meditative state called the base of the infinity of space. So there's a kind of correlation between this meditative state and this realm of existence, so that the meditative state is the karmic cause for rebirth into that existential or that realm of existence. Okay, but for the human being who attains the infinity of space, the lifespan can be 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, a normal human lifespan. But when you get to be reborn in the base of the infinity of space, there the lifespan is 20,000 aeons. And remember, I described earlier this morning the duration of an aeon. So this is like 20,000 Big Bang cycles. So the lifespan is so long there that it's really up for us, it's uppameya, immeasurable. Or certainly dupameya, difficult to conceive, difficult to measure. Okay, now we have here the ordinary person. This is a person who is unenlightened, a person who hasn't reached any stage of realization. Whoops. Okay. I don't want this. Okay, so the worldling remains there all his life, and when he has completed the entire lifespan of those devas, then he passes away from the realm of infinite space and takes rebirth elsewhere in lower realms, and it's said he goes to hell, the animal realm, or the preta realm, the realm of the afflicted spirits. And I'm going to come back to this later in a moment. First, let's just get the contrast with the noble disciple. Okay, so here we have the Blessed One's disciple, and it doesn't even say noble disciple. So I'm not sure that this necessarily implies that this disciple is a noble one. But let me just see how the commentary treats this. Oh, I see. It says, for the disciple, this disciple of the Blessed One, it says, Sautapana Sakaragami. Yes, Sotapana, so a stream enterer, Sakaragami, once returner, Anagami, non-returner. So this is, indeed, it's a noble disciple. So the noble disciple remains there all his life, completes the lifespan in that realm, and then attains final nibbana in that very same state of existence. So the noble disciple is incapable of falling away from that state, whereas the worldling can take rebirth even in the lower realms. But there's going to be a qualification that I'll come to. Okay, so that is the difference between it uses the expression, the instructed noble disciple and the uninstructed worldling, with respect to their future destination and rebirth. Okay, now I want to come to, there's a long note that I have here on that statement that the worldling, after falling away from the base of infinite space, goes to hell, the animal realm, or the infinity, or the sphere of afflicted spirits. Let's expand this a bit. Okay, so this is according to the Abhidhamma system. Okay, on passing away from the formless realm, one will not be reborn immediately after in one of the bad destinations. Because to be reborn in the formless realm, it's the result of very, very powerful, wholesome karma with strong, good roots. And technically, when one is reborn in the formless realm or any of the meditative realms, one is reborn, the rebirth consciousness has three good or beautiful roots: non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. And so you can't go from that kind of rebirth consciousness to the very bad rebirth consciousness, very weak rebirth consciousness, which takes one to the lower realms of existence. And so this is what the Abhidhamma says, that when one passes away, when a worldling passes away from the formless realm, they'll be reborn either on the same formless plane, or they can go higher to a higher formless realm, or if they come down to the sense sphere realm, they'll be reborn with a three-rooted rebirth consciousness. That means that they'll be reborn either as an intelligent human being or as a deva in one of the 6 sense-sphere heavenly realms. And so they will be reborn into the lower planes on a later occasion. So what happens, suppose one is reborn as a human being with good roots in the consciousness, but suppose one is then exposed to bad teaching, to wrong views, and one accepts those views. One comes under the influence of people with very charismatic personality, very gifted orator, who's able to present to give very convincing presentations of their distorted views, and so one gets captivated, maybe because of one's innate intelligence. One sees the speaker is very clever, very intelligent, and so one comes under the grip of their wrong views. And then that person maybe instills in one biased attitudes, antagonism, hatred towards other people. And so then one engages in actions based on those wrong views, and so one accumulates unwholesome karma that could then lead one down to rebirth in the lower realms. So the rebirth in the lower realms will not occur immediately after falling away from the formless plane, but in some subsequent rebirth. Okay, then here I have I think it's a long footnote. Yeah, if you want to see the details, by the way, about where one could be reborn when passing from one realm to another, if you have the comprehensive manual of Abhidhamma, then it's pages 226, 227. So that's in my edition, the Sri Lankan edition. In the American edition, the pages might be a little different, but close by. And it's very important to know that in order to get some idea of where we're going. Okay, then, so now this is the commentary of the Anguttara Nikaya, commenting on a different sutta in the Book of Four, as it says, but it is a similar sutta. It says, when there is future destination and rebirth, the noble disciple who is a trainee, that's Sotapanna Sakaragami, a stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, does not descend to a lower rebirth, but attains final nibbana either in the same form sphere existence, or in this sutta it will be a formless sphere existence, or in a higher realm. And then the sub-commentary to the Majjhima Nikaya. Do you want to go into all of these details? You want the details, or shall we skip over this? What do you think?
Yes, please. Yes,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay, so this sub-commentary says, when the Buddha speaks of the lifespans of humans and devas, he does not give specific figures for the lifespan of those in the 4 planes of misery, hell, animal realm, and so forth, and earthbound deities. Why not? Because in hell, it's the karma alone that determines the lifespan. So there's no fixed lifespan in the hells. And so one suffers there until one's karma is exhausted. And the same is true for the other unhappy, bad realms of rebirth. And then karma also determines the lifespan for the earthbound deities. And so some are reborn there live there only for a week, some for 2 weeks, and some, it said, even for an aeon. That all depends on karma. Okay, now amongst humans, some lay people become stream enterers and attain the fruit of once returning, non-returning, even arhatship. Of these, stream enterers can remain in the lay life their entire lives, but arhats either attain final nibbana, that is, a lay person achieves arhatship just before death, and so then they pass away and enter into final nibbana. Or if the lay person becomes an arhat, if they're not going to die right afterwards, naturally and necessarily they'll go forth into homelessness. Because they don't have those dispositions or inclinations to continue as lay in lay life as an arhat. You can imagine an arhat has to go shopping, to stop and shop, to think, what am I going to prepare for the meal tomorrow? Just no thoughts like that. What kind of clothes am I going to wear tomorrow? Okay, so they naturally go forth. And also the reason, because, I'm sorry to say this, but arhatship is the most virtuous state, and the lay life is inferior. So it can't support somebody who has all of those powerful samadhi and insights as an arhat. Okay, then earthbound deities can attain arhatship, and when they do so, they remain there all of their life as earthbound deities. Then amongst these 6 classes of sense-sphere deities, stream enterers and once returners will remain their entire lives. For a non-returner, it is suitable to go to a form sphere existence. I guess this means that when a sense sphere deity attains the stage of non-returning, then in their next life they'll be reborn in the form sphere, the rupa dhatu. And if a sense sphere deity attains arhatship, a little difficult to conceive, but I guess it's possible, then with their passing they attain final nibbana. In the form and formless realms, all remain for their entire lifespan, because the lifespan in the form realm and formless realm is fixed. So you can't pass away before the end of the fixed lifespan. Stream enterers and once returners, reborn in the form realm, do not return to this world, but they attain final nibbana there. So these are called jhana non-returners, which means that, okay, suppose a stream enterer attains jhana as a human being, but they don't attain anything higher. They don't attain once returning or non-returning. But they're still called a jhana non-returner. They're not an actual anagami yet. But because they have the jhana, they will be reborn in the form realm. And once they're reborn there, they don't fall away, they don't come back to the sense desire realm. But in the form realm, they'll attain the stage of once returner, and then attain the stage of non-returner. And then in the form realm, they'll attain the stage of arhatship. And the same for a once returner. So if a human once returner attains jhana, they'll be reborn in the form realm. So as a human being, they're called a jhana non-returner, because they won't come back to the human realm. The time is up. Let's see if we could finish this. So what determines rebirth for those who gain the 8 meditative attainments? So it's the jhana in which they are proficient. So they are reborn in accordance with whatever they are most proficient in. So let us say I attain the 8 meditative attainments, the 4 jhanas, the 4 formless meditations. But let's say I'm proficient in the 3rd jhana, and I have a weak attainment of the 4th jhana, weak attainment of the 4 formless meditations. So, because I have strong 3rd jhana, I'll be reborn in accordance with the 3rd jhana. Okay, but if I'm proficient in all of them, so what determines rebirth? It's the attainment of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. This is the highest of the 4 formless meditations. Okay, for noble disciples reborn among the 9 Brahma worlds, that is, for each jhana plane of the 3 lower jhanas, there's 3 Brahma worlds. And then there's, for the 4th jhana, there's only 1 Brahma world. That requires more elaborations. Okay, but let's just say, okay, for noble disciples reborn in the form realm, rebirth may occur there after they're reborn in one plane in the form realm, and then they pass away from there. They may be reborn either in the same plane or in a higher one, but not in a lower one. Then worldlings may be reborn in the same plane. That is, when the worldlings are reborn in the Brahma world, in one of the form realm, they may be reborn in the same plane, in a higher one, or in a lower one. And they can even fall away from the form realm, coming back either to the sense sphere deva worlds or to the human realm, with a 3-rooted rebirth consciousness with intelligence. Okay, then noble disciples in the 5 pure abodes and the 4 formless planes may be reborn in the same plane or in a higher one, not in a lower one. This is a little maybe obscure. A non-returner reborn in the plane of the 1st jhana purifies the 9 Brahma worlds and attains final nibbana while dwelling at the peak. What this seems to be saying is that, okay, somebody becomes a human being, or somebody as a human being becomes a non-returner with the 1st jhana as the seed, as the cause for their rebirth. So they take rebirth at the plane in the form realm corresponding to the 1st jhana. Then they can go through each of the Brahma worlds in succession until they come to the highest, I think, of the pure abodes, and then they attain final liberation there. Okay, then 3 deva worlds are called the best states of existence. Okay, so one is the plane of great fruit. So this is the Brahma world. This is difficult to explain in a short time. Okay, we'll be a little late. Okay, so I don't have to turn it around. Okay, so you see, each of the jhana planes has 3 realms corresponding to itself. And so it depends on whether the jhana attainment is relatively weak, middle strength, or powerful. And so say if somebody attains the first jhana relatively weak, then they'll be reborn amongst Brahma's retinue. If they gain the first jhana to a middle degree, they're reborn amongst Brahma's ministers. If they have the strong first jhana, they'll be reborn as a Mahabrahma. If they gain the second or third jhana, a same distinction of 3 levels according to the strength. The fourth jhana, this is on the Abhidhamma scheme of 5 jhanas, I'm sorry. Okay, so again, 3 levels. Then the 5th jhana of the Abhidhamma scheme, this is the 4th jhana of the Sutta scheme. We have only one purely mundane realm of rebirth. This is the Vehapala, the realm of great reward. So this is said to be the highest of all of the realms of existence, the mundane realms of existence in the Brahma world. So that's why it's called one of the highest realms of existence. But within the Brahma world, there's one, again, within the 4th jhana plane, or the 5th of the Abhidhamma scheme, there's a strange realm called the non-percipient realm, where there's no mind, no consciousness, nothing, no perception at all, just pure material phenomena. That's the non-percipient realm. We don't have to be concerned with that now. Then there are 5 pure abodes, which are said to be the realms of rebirth for non-returners. So unless one becomes a non-returner as a human being or a deva, one can't be reborn there. That's what if you try to get reborn there and they say, show me your ticket, you try to pass off and say, oh, I attained the 5th jhana, then the guard will say, that's not enough, where is your non-returner pass? I don't have one. I'll say, sorry, can't give you admission. Then you have to go down to rebirth someplace else. Okay, so of these 5 pure abodes, this is the highest. This is called the Akanita realm, the highest pure abode. And then amongst the formless, immaterial realm, the highest is the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Okay, so coming back to our sutta, where is the sutta? So it says that 3 deva worlds are called the best states of existence. So we saw of the different Brahma realms, the still mundane Brahma realms, the best is the plane of great fruit. But here it's called great reward. Then of the pure abodes, the best is the Akanita. That is the one here called the highest pure abode. And then of the formless realms, the best is called is the best of neither perception nor non-perception. And so non-returners reborn in these 3 states do not go higher and do not go lower, but attain final nibbana right there. Okay, I know that it might be many questions about this, but if you have questions, please make notes of them, write them down, or bear them in mind, and we'll come back after the meal, and then we could discuss those questions. That's very interesting, no? Very important for knowing how one fares from one state to another state. Okay, so let us now do the sharing of the merits. I'll do a short form because we're running late. And then we could come back 12:15 for questions. Akasata chabumata devanaga mahedika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata devanaga mahedika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata devanaga mahedika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe sata anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya pavagupadaya vichihetato etantare satakayupapanna Rupya rupicha sanya sanino dukha pamuchantu pusantu nibbutting. Okay, so we could stand and do the 3 half bows.